Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today, I have a wonderful guest speaker. And I don't know about you, but I don't know if you've had this in your life with your autistic child where they've become a fussy eater, or maybe they've been diagnosed with ARFID. Maybe they are selective eating, and it's such heartache and heartbreak having to watch your child not eat anything or only eat a certain amount of foods. As a European, as a Greek, we eat a lot, and the food is our love language. So seeing that and watching a child not be able to thrive through food is completely heartbreaking, and not to mention so utterly stressful for the parent who doesn't know what to feed their child to ensure that they remain healthy and full and got the nutrients to survive and to really thrive. So I want to introduce you to Alex from Tiny Bite Wellness. Alex, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Natalie. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. So tell me a little bit more about Tiny Bite Wellness and what you do and what you offer to parents.
So, Tiny Bite Wellness was really formed after 10 plus years of working with kids, mostly almost all on the spectrum with
Yeah.
severe picky eating. So, these weren't the typical, like, oh, my kid will eat like 30 foods and that's it. These were like really limited down to like 4 foods that they would eat. Some couldn't even like look at the foods. So after 10 years in the clinic doing occupational therapy and feeding therapy with kids with autism, I was starting to realize that even though they would make such great progress in the clinic, parents and caregivers were having a tough time carrying it over at home,
You're
which is
right.
very typical what we see
Okay.
with kids with autism, right? Carrying things over is extremely challenging. And sometimes they can do a specific skill in the classroom or with a particular person, but not at home where they spend a lot of their time and they have their meals with their families. So, Tiny Bite Wellness was formed to coach these parents that are home spending time with their kids
Yeah.
and are in their natural environment where kids with autism thrive, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
coaching the parents, I was able to connect with them in a different way, work in and through the parents and caregivers' schedule to actually see progress happen at a much higher and faster rate.
Right. Okay. And so, what do you think the biggest issue was when it comes to not being able to carry it over?
There were so many. I mean, a lot of kids did make wonderful progress. Every family was so different.
Yeah.
Some parents ate only whole foods for their kids, like didn't want inflammatory foods and had specific diets as well.
Yeah.
Some parents would drive 45 minutes to get the child one specific piece of pizza that they would
Wow.
eat.
Yep.
And I think this mom in particular that I'm thinking of was just scared to
Yeah.
try these foods at home. They were in
Mhm.
such a routine and a rut and didn't want to have the tantrum trigger, didn't want to have the sensory overload, and wasn't sure how to manage all of these things. Wasn't sure if she was doing it correctly, even though her child would try like 5 foods that day in the clinic. She was like, she would go back to her old ways and be like, well, I know he'll at least eat this pizza, so I'm going to go get it.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was part of like the breakdown that was very hard to bridge,
Mm-hmm.
especially only seeing the child maybe 2 times a week for maybe
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes each. They're spending so many days at home that sometimes we can't email back and forth, or they're not getting like a comprehensive um, coaching every time. Sometimes parents couldn't make it into the therapy sessions if they have to pick up another child.
Of
There were
course.
just such a variety of things that were not helping the child the best.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I totally understand. It makes me think of the times, so many times, just in my journey, where that anxiety really creeps up, and you almost feel paralyzed. That you just don't know what to do, and so you do fall back on default because you're so terrified. Like, what if it doesn't work? I just can't go through another meltdown, right? I don't want to see him upset or her upset. I don't have the bandwidth to manage this meltdown either. So I can understand why parents sort of stick to those safe foods because it's just easier, right? Just to keep the peace. But it makes sense that we've got to try and introduce these new foods and see what it looks like. Because I know a lot of kids have so many issues with the smell and the sight and the texture of a variety of foods. Has that been your experience as well?
Yes. So, with how I coach parents with feeding is all through a sensory lens. Um, Kids, neurotypical children only have about 20 steps to eating. And
Mhm.
then a child who saw in the clinic or kids with autism have to do maybe 60 steps to eating. And what they
Wow.
say is
Okay.
the general steps are 32. And these are all broken down through your senses. So,
Mhm.
being in the same room as a new food or a non-preferred food would be like the very bottom step. And then on this ladder, the top step would be eating the food.
Yeah,
So
right.
kids with autism kind of have to go up and down. If they're
Mhm.
dysregulated, getting them regulated first has to happen before they're actually able to learn, because all of our sensory systems have to be working together in order to chew a piece of food, because every time we take a bite, our whole sensory system has to reprocess what just happened. And
Wow.
if our system is out of whack, per se, in the moment, not regulated,
Yeah.
then it takes them longer, and then we kind of just shut down. So
I didn't even realize that there was that correlation between being regulated and eating. Now that you've explained that, that makes complete sense, but I just didn't even put the two together because I was just like, well, if you're hungry, you're going to eat, right? I'm not thinking about all the sensory things and all the sensory components that are coming into what needs to happen in order for your child to even get ready to eat, right? Like just the process of leading up to getting ready to eat. So going like segue into regulation, what do parents or what can parents do in order to help their children be regulated in order to even like maybe try new food or be in the same room as new foods or smell foods? Like what needs to happen?
yes. So I like to coach parents on how to regulate themselves, because our little ones like to take after how our nervous system is.
Yeah.
I don't want to say
Mhm.
like every single day, because I know there are of course days where like you're in a great mood and then your little one is way off and you're like, I thought we were on the same sync, um,
Absolutely. It's
but
true.
when right, when
Yeah.
our system is regulated, we are better able to handle the pushbacks and the temper tantrums and
Yeah.
the dysregulation. So
Mhm.
we need to be regulated first, and then our child does. And that's actually one of the things that I work on. Do the parents know how to get their child in a ready to learn state? It
Mhm.
may not look calm for every child, but everyone's regulation looks a little bit different.
Yeah.
Um, and then they're better able to handle those sensory stimuli that might be a little strong for them. So,
Mhm.
a child, say, who gags when they look at a food, or their sibling. I've had a lot of kids who like can't even be at the same table if their siblings eating a food they don't like, because just
Mm.
looking at them eating it will make them gag.
Really?
But if they have like the heavy work and they're regulated, they will be able to tolerate it a little bit better.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really working on that first is like my first step before even getting to like choosing what foods and
Yeah.
all of the strategies. Like regulation is
Yes.
definitely first.
Okay, and so can you share with the audience just one type of regulation technique that you would offer parents who are maybe trying to introduce maybe one new food or one new smell to their child?
Yeah, so for regulation before, I like to do heavy work activities. So this can
Right.
be pushing chairs, it can be doing like wall push-ups, even like pushing your hands together, joint compressions, deep
Hmm.
squeezes, give a lot of input to their body and help calm them down. Some children, a lot of vestibular input, like this swinging, rhythmic swinging, is very calming for their systems. So those are the big two that I usually recommend before sitting down at the table or before even transitioning
Yeah,
to a
right.
meal.
Oh, I love that so much because I think often, well, I can't speak for everybody, but I would definitely not have even thought that that was something that I needed to do for my child to come and sit down at the dinner table to eat, right? So it's interesting to see how much regulation plays a role in every single part of an autistic child's view of the world, right? I think that we sometimes forget that, especially if you're neurotypical, you're just taking it for granted that you're going to sit down and eat. Like that's just what we're going to do. And so there are so many steps that we need to see that before. And then I think once we can really address that, it sounds like things can move along quite nicely. Would you agree?
Definitely. I think it's a huge piece of the puzzle. And then another piece that I also help segue into the food is definitely using your child's interests
Yes.
to help them get engaged and interested in the new food. However small that might be, even if it's just working on being in the same room,
Huh?
adding their fun, like, interest in the
Uh-huh.
room. Like, if they like pirates, we're gonna hide in our room. Should we hide in this chair or this chair? And then just getting them into that play without them even noticing that we're like around a new food or in the same room as a new food
Ah, okay.
really just
Interesting.
helps to like reset that negative energy
Uh-huh.
around the whole mealtime.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. Have you guys got over there? Have you got sushi train?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I've got this idea because obviously my son is obsessed with Thomas the Tank. And so I've just got this idea of like food in all the carriages and it just going round and round and just watching the trains. But that could be a really good way to expose kids because he's like, he loves trains. So having that might be that segue that we can, tolerate something or be in the same room or look at it or whatnot. And just have it a little bit of fun with it, right? I love that. So, can you explain why, in certain situations, parents might find children will eat food, like a specific piece of food, one time, but then the next time they're refusing it completely? How does that work, and why is that happening with children? And can we rectify that, or is it just how they're feeling, or is it because they're regulated? What could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. And different ages, there's usually like reasons different age groups get stuck on certain foods. Like
Mm-hmm.
toddlers are more so testing boundaries unless
Mm-hmm.
they have like a sensory aversion or a skill that they're missing, like they can't move the food in their mouth properly or they need some other skilled therapy. And then some children will eat, if it's their like safe food, they eat it every night. And then what happens is it's called food jogging, where they eat it every night. And then after like a few months or years, they all of a sudden don't want it anymore. And
Yeah.
it's just because they've had it too many times
Mm-hmm.
that they lose that food. And then their safe food list just continues to get smaller. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why one thing we can do to help prevent that is separating it. So every other day, have
Yep.
that specific safe food, or changing it slightly every, like, depending on how rigid your child is around food. Because I know certain children are extremely rigid or will look at it like out the corner of their eye and just like leave it leave it on their plate and that. But that's a good opportunity to like change a tiny bit of it, even if it's just sitting on their plate.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, changing the food or separating it every other day is
Love it.
one way that we work through that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, mind you, I'm very much a creature of habit. So I eat the same breakfast every day because I just think it's easy to not have to think about what I'm going to eat. But after a while, you get over it. You're like, oh, I need to change things up now. So I totally appreciate that. Um, what is the best way? I guess we probably addressed that a little bit. Like in terms of addressing new foods, you're just really talking about making sure that there's lots of fun and lots of regulation. Would that be right?
Yeah. So regulation piece and then really just using their interests. So I will pull
Yeah.
on a game that we played earlier when I was in the clinic. I would
Yep.
use a game that we played earlier in the gym and bring it over to the table. So I can
Yeah.
use your example
Right.
of the trains. If we did an obstacle course, pretending we were Thomas the Tank Engine, going through the tunnel and going over the bridge, I would sit down at the table and be like, I'm going to build our obstacle course that we did. I'm going to put the bridge here and I'm going to put the tunnel here.
Mm-hmm.
And my carrot is going to be Thomas. Here he comes. And then make him go around and then
Yep.
see if that child imitates any
Mm-hmm.
part of that. Can they build their own to look like mine? If they're not
Mm-hmm.
ready to touch it, can they use a fork to move it? And just kind of meeting them where they are,
Mm-hmm.
but using a play scheme that they know and bringing it over to the table definitely helps to get into their world and
Yep.
allow them to like want to engage and get
Yeah.
curious about it.
Yeah, I know. I love that. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about messy play, because we obviously, when you've got a baby and like there's all talks about messy play and letting them really touch all those, all the foods and letting them feed themselves, and there's just mess everywhere. Would you recommend messy play for children on the spectrum?
Yes, absolutely. So what's really interesting is messy play can even be something simple like water play,
Mm-hmm.
up to something as extreme as like mud or shaving cream or super messy goop that you make. Um, and what it does is it's just getting your, again, coming back to the sensory system, getting your body used to tolerating those sticky textures, those textures that change every time you touch it.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically with food, when you're crushing, like, say, a cracker and you
Mm-hmm.
feel all the particles come off in your hand, some of the clumps are big and some of them are super tiny. What that's doing is it's allowing your brain to understand what happens when you crunch it in your mouth. So
Right.
even if your child is like taking a hammer and your messy play is just crunching like old cereal, they're
Okay.
seeing what happens when that force is applied to that cereal and then what would happen in their mouth.
Yep. Yep.
um, also teaches great coping skills, like if you do have a slime, how to
Mm-hmm.
get it off your hand and how to tolerate that, because some kids I've seen like don't want to touch it and they'll avoid like any wet foods like applesauce or any dips like ketchup, because they don't know how to handle it on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be like, here mom, like wipe it off. And if they don't have that skill, then they don't know how to deal with it when it's closer to their body. And if
Yeah.
they're not going to want to touch it, they're definitely not going to want to bring it closer to their mouth.
No, exactly. And would you say messy play is also good for kids that are older? So not necessarily just young, but does it matter how old the child is? Like if they're a
Yes,
teenager?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
fine.
think about everything that we do that is considered messy, even with like food. Like if you're making meatballs, like even if you have gloves on, it's still, I think, considered messy play. If you're
Yeah.
gardening with or without gloves, um, just different things that we have to do in our daily lives. I think throughout the lifespan, I think being messy is a great thing for our whole system. Just a great like sensory experience all around.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a fair few followers who follow the podcast and follow me, who have got children diagnosed with ARFID. Are the strategies that you are talking about, would they be suitable for kids who have been diagnosed with ARFID? And if not, is there anything else that they can be do to support their child?
Yeah, so there are a few different types of ARFID, but all of them, all of the sensory strategies that I use are all play based and they are going with the child, meeting the child where they are. So nothing is force or pressure. And that works really well with children with ARFID because if they have usually high anxiety around food, so
Mhm.
when it's play, it lessens their anxiety because they don't feel the pressure to have to eat it. So
Yeah.
they're more willing to explore it.
Mhm.
And when they're exploring it through play, they're actually moving up those steps to eating.
Yeah,
So these
right.
work wonderfully with kids with ARFID as well.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, good. Good, good, good. Okay, time for rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. What's the most surprising thing that you've learned with working with autistic children?
Hmm. I have learned that they truly are all unique and there is not, and that I think is like the most special thing with working with kids that are autistic, because you just get to go into their world and it is just magical every single time.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. What's one piece of advice that you would give to parents who are just entering the journey where they've realized that their child is a picky eater or a selective eater or maybe has been diagnosed with ARFID? What piece of advice would you give them?
I would let them know that they are perfectly positioned to help their little one. I think a
Mm,
lot of parents are scared, understandably so. It can be
mhm.
an extremely scary thing when when your child is not getting the nutrition that they need.
Yeah.
Um, but they know their child the best,
Mhm.
and leaning into that and using that connection along with, other therapies if they need them, of course, to support their child. But they have the power to really connect with their child and use that and their interests to help their child make progress around food.
Yeah, of course, because they're safe, as a parent, you're the safe space to your child, right? They trust you the most. And so using those strategies, I think, is so helpful because ultimately you're going to be the person that can introduce it because you're with them the most time as well, right? And they love you, they care for you, they want you to be happy. So using that sort of relationship would be really helpful, I would think. So definitely. What is a sensory tool or strategy that you would swear by?
Heavy work. I mean, I work out every morning lifting weights.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yes, it's so easy to add it in. I think a lot of parents get nervous. They think that it's like all this extra stuff, but like I love using animal walks, like doing wheelbarrow walks or like having your little one use their hands and like walk like a bear on the floor. It can be something so simple
Mhm.
that they can do while you make dinner or you help them with and do your heavy workouts together.
Yes.
Um, but just getting that input into their body, it's like the like calming feeling that we feel after a workout, not like the endorphin rush necessarily, but you know how you feel like a little bit grounded, you're ready
Yeah,
to take on the next activity.
yeah, yeah.
It definitely helps reset them the quickest.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. What is a mantra or a quote that you live by?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question.
Hard ones.
um hmm, Play every day.
Yes. Yes. Oh, we do. And as parents and adults, we forget. We forget to play, right? I think it's been conditioned out of us because we're doing all the responsibilities and all the things, and we're busy and we're time poor and all this sort of stuff. And, we just lose that element of play. Oh, yeah. Time to play. Is there a book that you would recommend parents read?
So when I first got into the world of autism and all of the things sensory, um, the first book, I'm not like the title is a little interesting, but it's called The Out of Sync Child. And I'm
Okay.
not sure of the author, but it goes over the whole sensory system and strategies to use. And it was very, I think, very, very easy to understand from a beginner standpoint.
Yep.
If you wanted to pull strategies and kind of understand your child and their sensory system,
Yes.
that would be one of my go-to books.
Okay, I will pop that link in the show notes so that people can have a look at it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. Can you just remind people where they can find you, your website, and your socials before we wrap up?
Yes. So my email, my website is tinybitewellness.com. And then my social media is at tinybitewellness.
Lovely. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks, Alex. Bye.
Bye.